welcome to another episode of the SaaS Stories podcast. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Martin Garvey from Gong, all the way in Ireland. How are you, Martin?
Doing really well, yeah. Thanks for having me, Joanna.
Now, I love that you have a sales background because I'm always curious about sales in the world of SaaS. It's a very competitive landscape. So I'm hoping to really pick your brain today and get lots of insights into the world of sales when it comes to selling SaaS. But first, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey in the SaaS space, how you got here, how you came to work for Gong. What's your story, really?
Yeah, I would consider it, and as I tell my mother, or my mother tells me, it's probably non-traditional. So I started working directly in SaaS just under 2 years ago, working for Gong. Before that, different variety of industries, consultants, sales, etc. in it, but in very different verticals. And in my previous role, I got to work in a number of tech companies and got to work and see what it looked like. And then I got really clear about in the future what I want in my career for the next stage. And when I got clear on that, I then got clear on what the elements are within that. So I was really clear, I want to work in SaaS. But then, okay, so there's lots of SaaS companies out there. So I got clear on, I want to work in an early stage. I want to work where there's lots of things not figured out, where I get to build from the ground up. I've got to lean in. And I've got to be the one that's like, we've never done this before, so I've got to figure this out with my peers and other people within Gong. So that's what I got. And then through a number of different kind of considerations that I landed upon Gong as well. So it's a little bit non-traditional, I would think.
No, absolutely. And so Gong has become a leader in the conversational marketing space. So what strategies did you and the sales team employ at Gong to really stay ahead in this competitive landscape?
One of the biggest or big benefits that we have in Gong is that we sit on the largest sales data set than any other company that's in existence. Like, it's actually 5 times more than any company in our space. And what that allows us to do is we actually have a Gong Labs team, which is our data research team. What they do is they're analyzing sales conversations and deals using Gong's revenue intelligence and platform. And then they're able to share the results out with us. So we're able to see, based on billions of sales interactions now, right down to certain phrases work, when to bring in different decision makers. You know, as recently as kind of last week, our Gong Labs team came back and said that, like, can I make a suggestion? Is used 157% more by SDRs in successful cold calls. And there's lots of rationale behind that, but it's insights like that we can mine because we sit on this data set. And obviously then if you think about customers, they have their own bespoke version of that. Obviously what we see is totally anonymous, but we're able to pinpoint using the technology we have, be able to see like what works in terms of multi-threading. How many contacts do you need on a deal to increase your success rate? Who should those contacts be? It's not like, well, you need a VP. It's like, well, who is that VP? So because we sit on all this data, we're able to analyze and understand and get those insights.
That's amazing data. So, I mean, you've probably analyzed quite a bit of this data now. What are some of the like top 3 insights that come up when you're analyzing this data?
I think one of the biggest ones we see is, and we see this in Gong ourselves, is that our win rate goes up considerably when we have 4 or more contacts on a deal.
Yes.
And that's by our own, so they're our own internal deals. So obviously when we're selling, what we also see is that, and that's actually a win rate of about 16%, that it goes up by increasing by 16% when we have 4 or more contacts in a deal. When we think about it at the individual level, we have metrics that identify, like, for a good conversation, like being a successful conversation, how much the conversation should go back and forth. And within that, then it's like, what's the ideal number of questions we should be asking? Now, it's not linear and the world is not black and white, but what it is it's directionally shows us successful sellers have this number of questions, this is how long they pause for. And it's stuff that we intuitively might know, but the data then backs it up for us. So we're able to coach, and that's just one example of it. Other examples would be like, how do you forecast the quality of the cold outreach you're sending? Like how leaders, when to bring people into deals. Like people, you might even see it as recently as yesterday, LinkedIn, our research team put in, like, people think about, we've got to have decision makers in the deal. You do, you just don't need to have them in all of it. Because if they're in, they'll just get deal fatigue. Even these big enterprise deals, which our team is leading, you need to bring them in at the right time. And rather than it being of course, sales is an element of feel to it, but I'd rather have the feel and the data to back it up rather than just being pure intuition.
Yeah, that's really good insights, actually, because I was just reading a statistic on this earlier today by LinkedIn, and they were saying that in the world of B2B, you actually need 6.8 decision makers influenced before you convert them into a customer. Is that your experience as well? I think this was based in the APAC region, but it's probably similar around the world.
Yeah, look, I think certainly what our data shows is that sales cycles, unsurprisingly, are longer. There's more people involved. Gone are the days where it'd be one or two people. People are buying in committees now.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of our biggest customers. They came with we need more help coaching our sellers. And actual fact, what it came about was they actually need to do more multi-threading. They weren't multi-threaded on accounts. Now, we know that that's important, but if I know it's important and you kind of coach me to it, A, how do I track that? But B, if you can show me the data, and me as a seller, you're telling me it's going to put more money in my pocket if I multi-thread more because the data shows it, like that's where kind of data just wins the argument.
Yeah. I'd love to explore this a little bit further, actually, because it's quite a big deal. I have so many, I hear from so many people and they kind of say, we were talking to someone, it was a great conversation, we almost had the deal, we were at the deal stage, basically, they were in the pipeline, and then they just went completely quiet and ghosted us. And I always think it's probably because they couldn't get buy-in from the other 4 people, like you mentioned. But I suppose, who would those other 4 be? Would they be in the same department? Are they kind of multi-department? What's your experience with that?
It's the great politician answer, Joanna. It depends, right? So
Yeah.
if you look at a lot of sales methodologies, and we use Medic internally, so we look at like what's the decision process, and like so if you look at say an SMB or mid-market type deals, they would have maybe 1, 2, 3 people typically are involved in that. And what we have found is finding out early, like, so who else, and asking on the way, who else needs to be involved in this? We found that a great question to ask here is like, so who would be put out if they weren't involved in this conversation right now?
Yeah.
And what that does is it opens it up to being, well, here's our decision-making process. Some buyers or some sellers, will just ask it outright, or they'll just share it directly with you. But particularly for these large enterprise deals, which we're looking after, we know there's a big committee within this. Thankfully, one of the integrations we have and what we've built in Gong is we have recommended contacts. So what we'll be able to see is to answer your question, like, so we have an industry, different verticals. Not only will we say you need to be reaching out to a VP of sales, we would know based on win rates and based on previous deals, again, going back to the data piece, we would say, like, here's someone that you're not connected with. We recommend that you go and try and connect with this person. So that's how, rather than me saying it's definitely people in different departments or it's the same department, it kind of depends. But Gong sitting on this data can recommend contacts for you to reach out to.
Yeah. And so I know Gong uses AI technology to really help with this decision making and this data. I suppose if a new client was to come and ask for this kind of data, how long would it take to get it?
It's more a question of so we would need a set number of calls and a set number of deals. Yeah. Now, if they were using a previous or a competitor, a different software at the moment, we could just port over what they already have. Or if, which a lot of companies are doing now, they're different. There's different ways to record calls. So we could just ingest that. So if they've got a certain number of deals or a certain number of calls recorded, then we can ingest that and they can move quicker. If they're starting from scratch, it just takes, because obviously we need the data, we need the inputs to get the outputs. So it takes a little bit of time with that. But I mean, Gong can be switched on in a matter of hours. This is what people are, and I get asked this question all the time when you sit in new prospect meetings, or it's go, well, can it really just be switched on? And it can. It can really, we've got over 150 different integrations at the moment, and it can be switched on. Obviously now, the larger the complexity of the organization, there's more professional service that are needed, implementation, bespoke, and things like that. But you can start recording calls within a matter of hours or using the platform.
And so also with your experience, because B2B sales cycles can be notoriously quite long, like they can pretty much last for 18 months or longer. Have you seen you know, as a result of this data, them becoming a little bit shorter?
We have, yes. So there's a number of different customer and client success stories we have where we've reduced not only their sales cycle time, but we've also reduced the onboarding time for new people, for new reps. Because they're typically two of the biggest time sucks. It's like two or three, I would say, is you've got new reps, how do we get them up to speed quickly? And then also, like within that, then what's their time to first deal? And then the second part is just how long is their sales cycle? Because your sales cycle, go back to an earlier point you mentioned, Joanna, if we're not talking to the right people, sales cycle is just going to go on and on and on. And if we haven't identified the pain or a compelling event, if we keep going back to Medic, then that's going to go on and on with that. But one of the things that we've realized as well is that companies invest quite a lot of money in rolling out like a Challenger or a Sandler or a Medic, but there's no great way, I haven't seen it, to be able to track if we're using that. So this is the other one of the biggest challenges I see or we see right now is that, and Salesforce just came out with their 6th edition of State of the Nation or State of Sales, and within that they've shown that 70% of sellers' time is spent on non-selling activity.
Yeah.
So filling in a CRM, writing notes, taking notes, preparing for one-to-ones, all of this non-selling activity. And that just goes back to what we said, is that if I'm spending all this time trying to do that, I'm not reducing my sales cycle. Whereas if we can take away all, and there's two big problems with the admin side, but if we can take away that from people, they can spend more time selling, which is going to significantly help reduce the sales cycle.
Can I ask a bit of a quirky question? I'm just thinking a little bit differently because I've had the last few guests on the podcast have been really the founders of customer retention tools. I'm wondering if Gong can also be used on the customers, you know, maybe to look at data like things, you know, are they thinking of leaving? Are they happy using the tools? Could that work in that regard?
So we have one of the biggest, yes is your answer, right? And then that's the headline. And then underneath it, what we're able to see is that we're able to serve up risks within a deal. And that's, yes, it's a new business deal, but it's also an existing customer. And because Gong is not just looking at the activity back and forth, which a lot of providers are, it's like, well, you send 5 emails, you got 4 replies, this is healthy, this is good. We can go in and understand the context. So let's imagine, Joanna, like you're an existing customer, and you say something along the lines of, I'm experiencing consistent errors and issues with feature Y. Because Gong understands that that's a risk, it will flag this to the rep, but it will also flag it to their manager. So a CS or a CS leader, they're able to see quite clearly that there's a risk within this. So we're not waiting for people to either tell their manager, we're not waiting for people to put it into a CRM. And let's be frank, not many people like doing that or do it. So the fact that we can serve up the context of what's been discussed, we can identify when there's risks within existing customers as well, yes.
Yeah, oh, amazing. Because I think that's quite important. I recently was researching customer retention. One quote by one of my favorite SaaS authors, Jason Lemkin, is that customer retention is where 90% of the revenue is. So it's actually a very important thing to measure. And it's much easier to upsell and cross-sell existing customers than it is to find new ones, right?
Yeah, and I think, look, we've certainly shifted to being focused on both. It's not that we weren't, but there's an emphasis now within the business. Is that, like, to your point, it's the age-old thing. Like it's harder to get new customers than it is to grow within existing, and focusing on that. But a lot of the time, you're kind of like the thrill of the new customer and the hunt and the closing and all that. But the benefit of Gong as well, like our CS team and CS teams throughout, 4,000 customers we have now are one of the highest users of Gong as well.
Yeah. Okay. Having looked at this data, are there any kind of actions or maybe specific words that trigger, basically an alert to the sales team that say this customer, maybe they were at the awareness stage, now they're ready to, have that a sales team reach out to them. Is there any like triggers that you find follow like a pretty consistent pattern?
I think again, if you go back to, so obviously we've looked at a variety of different ways in our product roadmap. I've never worked with a company or in a company where the product is just evolving all the time. It is actually a job in itself to keep up to date with all of the updates we're having within this. So we're able to see elements of that right now. I think a lot more of it's coming in the roadmap that we have. Yes.
Okay. That would be really interesting, I think, just, analyzing specific behaviors and patterns that then really help you say, okay, this person's now ready to move to the decision phase of their buyer journey, for example.
Yeah, and one of the main ways we've done that, sorry, Joanna, is we've partnered and integrated with a lot of intent data, like 6sense and other ones. So that's now within our platform within that. So there's so many great companies doing this. So there's that aspect of, well, are we better off doing that ourselves, or where do we actually just bring in that into the platform? So one of the big things we're doing is we're trying to lessen the swivel head mentality of, I've got to go here for prospecting, I've got to go here for writing my emails, I've got to go here for my research, I've got to go here for my intent data. And with these 150 different integrations, you can just live in Gong.
That's amazing, because I do currently use about 10 different tools for account-based marketing. So this sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Stepping away from the tool, I think I'd love to explore maybe just some common mistakes that you see sales team make. And it could be on the tools, it could just be with conversations. What are the most common mistakes you see as the sales leader, and how can they avoid them?
I think I've referenced one already. One is the 70% of sellers' time spent on non-selling activity. Like, it's such a time. So when you put that into context, like, it's, if someone's working a 40-hour week, you're looking at close to 30 hours of them doing non-selling activity. Now, someone challenged me in a breakfast we had a couple of months ago. He said, well, should that number be zero, Martin? Or should be 100% selling? I went, well, I mean, yes, in a utopian world, but that's not reality. But at the same time, 70% is way too high. So how do we, and and if you look at that report from Salesforce, there isn't just one chunk that says they're spending 70% here. It's 8% there, it's 9% here, it's 6% there. So how do we reduce this admin burden on sales teams? And it's also on sales leaders. The amount of time that we hear from people that it takes to A, create an accurate forecast, and then B, submit it, and then sit in a forecast meeting. You're talking hours for leaders as well. So within Gong as well, not to go back to that, but like, we have a forecast aspect to our platform that reduces that way down. And I've been the sales leader who's sitting there and people are putting in Excel, and then I'm taking a haircut and I'm hoping for the best, I'm white knuckling it. And it really goes to the second challenge I see at the moment is that, like, we're running our businesses, sales leaders are running their businesses off of CRM data. And the CRM data by Gartner tells us that 99% of a sales conversation and data doesn't make it into the CRM. So if you think about it, most salespeople are on calls, they're going back and forth. They're then their business or their leader is saying, can you fit in the CRM? Can you fit in the CRM? Can you fit in the CRM? I've never heard a salesperson go, you know what my favorite thing is? Fill in the CRM. Add more fields. I just can't wait to do it. They don't like doing it. And then when they do it, they do the bare minimum, absolute bare minimum. And then it's objective, and a lot of time it's subjective. Sorry, and a lot of time it's out of date. It's a lot of out of date. So, but that's one challenge, because we're putting the burden on the sellers. But the sales leaders then are trying to run their business based on what's in the CRM, and the CRM, just like we said, is not a source of truth. It's just a source of updates that are not completely and utterly objective, and they don't understand the context as well as other ways. So that's the biggest challenge I see. So it's inevitable then that we're going to be missing forecasts. It's inevitable then that deals are not going to come in because we don't have the visibility within that. So how do we get that? So they're the two biggest challenges I see at the moment is the amount of time we spend on non-selling and then running our business on what's in the CRM.
How would you run it if not the CRM?
Joanna, you've just teed it up, but it feels like we've rehearsed this, which we haven't. But like it truly is gone. Like I've done it elsewhere, right? So the benefit. So if you look at a lot of businesses, not all of them, but a lot of businesses are running off the CRM. So they're looking, and then when we need more information, we add more fields to the CRM, which just antagonizes the sellers more. They just don't do it, and they've got either happy years or they put in their bare minimum. The benefit of Gong is Gong's not based on a seller's opinion. So as an example, right now, I'm about to walk into my one-to-one in about an hour, one of our reps. I've already been able to see where all her deals are at. I don't need her to tell me, because this morning I get an email from Gong tells me all the meetings she has today. I can then go in and see a recap of everything that happened yesterday. It will raise red flags to me for anything that's happening there. it will give me a forecast score. So using our own AI models, I'm not reliant on her forecasting. I can look at the intent, and you go back to your intent. It shows based on 300 different signals, what's the chances of this deal coming in this next quarter. So that context and understanding the reality means that now in our one-to-one, I'm not asking her, where's this deal at? What can we do on this? I'm coming in fully informed to be able to work with her on how do we get these deals across the line.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of answered my next question actually a little bit, because it really does help with managing the sales teams as well. And my next question was really around, scaling sales teams. So for companies in SaaS that are, getting more and more clients and generating more and more sales, they do come with a lot of scaling challenges, especially when it comes to growing the people and growing the teams. What have been some of your biggest challenges when it comes to scaling and hiring, and especially in recent times?
I think one of the biggest aha moments I had was when I moved from an individual contributor and IC role into a manager role. I realized it took me a while, quite frankly, but I realized it was no longer about me.
Yeah.
I used to achieve my results myself as an IC. Now as leading a team or department, and that can be front line, second line, or third line. It's all about, I now get my results with and through my people. And it took me months to realize that. And then you default, because what am I typically used to? It's not unsimilar to a sports team, is that the best player sometimes becomes the manager or the captain, but not necessarily they should do that, right? They try and do everything within that. And I did that. I moved into a manager role and I was on the deals. I was pretty much running the deals, which was no good for me. And it was definitely no good for the reps, because they were just like, why are you here? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? So I realized that very quickly, or sorry, not quickly, but it was one of my biggest ahas, that I now got my results with and through people. And then the second piece was where I can share, I share a lot. And it's one of the Gong principles. But even before that, I would rather teams and our teams know a little and often than a whole lot when it's too late. Because when I and maybe I'm kind of leading the way I like to be led, but I certainly believe that a lot of people prefer to be informed, and where you can bring them in. I can't remember where I read it, but everyone gets a voice, not everyone can vote. So how do we hear from people? How do we involve them in things? But they can't, obviously, we can't say, well, you want this and you want this and you want this and you want this. But at least if I contribute, I involve me and I learn, and I'm part of this as well. So the over communication for me is the second critical piece.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I think you still learn pretty quickly, by the way. It's probably taken me 15 years to learn that lesson. And I still kind of fall back into that trap of, doing it myself and not really teaching the team. It is a learning I've had recently. I think, investing more time into training and communicating, and then really just trusting them with the jobs. And I've been actually really impressed. And I think it just takes that letting go and seeing that you can trust them to eventually then go, okay, I need to be in charge of, bigger and different things.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I can see myself default to it as well at times, particularly when there's pressure situations. But I think there's two parts. One is that it obviously takes a little bit of time and consistency, and then the second part is if I now I'm not doing what I believe and what people might think was made me great, I now have to develop other skills, which is much harder than when I'm an IC and I'm closing deals and I'm running sales cycles. But then when I move into management, like I'm about strategic alignment, balancing strategic and tactical focus. So that's harder because I got to learn that. Whereas over here, I know this. So it's natural for me to go back to what I know, what I'm to some degree comfortable in. But that other piece of like strategic responsibilities and making sure that like you're managing org complexity, like at that leadership director and above level, like that's really because you're learning again. But ultimately, that's why you've been put in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. Future trends in sales and marketing. Now, obviously, AI has been a big one. I think data is probably the biggest one. I recently watched a documentary on Amazon, and they were saying that Amazon is actually a data company. It's not a retail company, which was really interesting, I thought. So,
Love that.
what are your thoughts on where this is headed? What are some future trends that you're seeing, that will really create the biggest impact?
Yeah, look, I think there's lots, and I'm glad you said AI because I was going to say it, and I didn't want to have to go somewhere else with it. But I think within that, like we're still we're still trying to figure this out, right? And like as recently as over the weekend, I was reading something in the Financial Times in this part of the world where it was like more than half of the largest US companies see AI as a potential risk to their businesses. So we've gone through this, or we're going through this, like, it's this, wow, it's really cool. Here's ChatGPT. Businesses and our AI business are getting wildly funded above anything else. And now it's like, okay, so what's the benefit from a business standpoint of this? And I feel like we're much further along in a year than we were. But as you can see with that article in the FT, like there's still a lot of concerns around, well, where is this and risk to businesses? I mean, if we focus on the positive side of it, and we go back to the sales aspect, like, so in the industry right now, the industry average is probably about a 3% response rate to cold outreach, be it email typically or call. So I guess 3%. Now, that's not great, but if you think about the amount of hours and time and effort that typically sales people, be it sales development people or AEs, are putting into constructing these emails, the return is even worse. So one of the ways that I'm excited about is how do we use AI for hyper personalization? So AI will and is right now getting to know customers and prospects better than they can nearly know themselves. And we're seeing small little examples of that, like Amazon recommendations, all this kind of on that side of it. But like AI is going to get to the point where I believe from this hyper personalization, where it's going to leverage insights from communication styles, preferences, past interactions, and then craft the conversations in the moment to make, and the benefit of that is it's going to save time, but it's also going to make customers feel uniquely understood and valued.
Yeah,
so that's one of the biggest ways that I see. I think if we go back to that earlier piece when we talked about like onboarding reps and people like that, like, so not too distant future that you can see a world where like it's not onboarding, it's kind of insta-boarding in a way. Is that like 6-month ramp up times, obviously different per industries, but they'll be whittled down. Like, so AI driven training programs, shoulder to shoulder assistance, ensuring from day one reps are informed, capable, and able to actually really time to close their first deal is significantly reduced. So they're two of the ones that I would be most excited about in the next months or years.
Yeah. Maybe hopefully even helping with that 30 hours of non-sales tasks, taking those on board and really freeing the sales team to focus on what's important.
Absolutely.
I think personalization is a big one. We know it works well. We run a lot of account-based marketing campaigns, so it's kind of the key tactic to use. However, there's obviously lots of challenges to make it work really effectively, and trying to get, say, a list of one-to-many and really personalize their experience, that can be challenging. So I think the new tools that are going to come out, you mentioned so many of the features of Gong already that could help with that. So yeah, I think that's probably another trend that I'm excited to see in the world of marketing.
Yeah, there's a lot of really impressive tools out there at the moment. You get at the top of the funnel, if you like. So Gong across this platform has that as well. So we've got our sales engagement, we've got our deal management, then we've got our forecast piece. But at that top of funnel piece there's a couple of really exciting tools, and it's really just kind of saving sellers time and selling reps time, so you can do more of this personalization. Because I don't know about you, Joanna, but I still get I know I'm on a mailing list, and I know you know nothing about me, and I know that you've changed Joanna to Martin and sent the exact same email, and I know that me and most other people are just delete because you've taken no time. You've taken no time to show me that you know me, but as you said, at scale, I guess whole personalization at scale, how do we do that? So the tools that can help us with that are going to significantly eat into that 70% staff.
Yeah, for sure. I have one bad experience that I keep having, and it's really frustrating me because I think as a consumer, you do start to expect that personalized experience. You want the company to know you. So I'm not going to name any names, but basically I get constant emails with specific holidays that I should be going on. However, the company hasn't realized that I've got 2 young kids. And when I say young, 9 and 6. So they've now had 9 years to figure out that I have kids, but yet they keep sending me emails around like honeymoon holidays.
I know. But so it's everywhere, right? So it's yes from sales and SaaS, but it's also those personal experiences. And I kind of long for the day where you because we've had a couple where they feel very personalized, and it's either it's typically like in a hotel. I remember in Ireland, we went on a holiday and we dropped the car off, went to the hotel, come back, and a couple of hours later, the doorman still knew my name. And I'm like, how does he know this? But like that shouldn't be the exception. Like that should be the norm. And I feel like we're getting closer to that. But that's where the hyper personalization that AI that I just mentioned is going to significantly help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of excited to see where it goes, kind of scared to see what happens, but we shall see.
Yes, definitely.
I have recently started a tradition on this podcast. You're actually my first one to launch this tradition on, and it's basically I pull out advice from the previous guest that we had on the show, and the previous guest was actually Tony Yang from Market Capital. Now, I almost feel like I pulled this advice out at random, but I almost feel like it was specifically designed for you because he does mention something about sales strategies in this. So I thought I'm going to share with you his quote, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. So he says, when you're doing outreach as an early stage SaaS founder, instead of going directly into sales mode, take a softer approach by asking for feedback and making the recipient feel like the expert. This genuine relationship building tactic can lead to a better connections and more meaningful engagement. What's your thoughts on that?
First of all, I'm honored, Joanna, that you're launching this with me, and it's also just ratcheted up the pressure that this has to be something good with it. Like if when I hear it and break it down, like for me, so it's talking about the importance of building relationships, right? And then understanding from the customer, potential customer sides, what's important to them, rather than just pushing our sales agenda. And like that sounds so simplistic, but from what Tony has said there is like and he's mentioned early stage SaaS founders, like that's relevant to, I would say, let's not be, totally utopian, but that's relevant to pretty much everybody, but especially for all sellers. And it reminds me of a book that I just kind of picked up recently again to read, and it's not new. It's from Dale Carnegie about how to win friends and influence people. And one of the things he talks about, and that is to begin in a friendly way, right? And this was something he wrote in the 1930s. And his whole approach about like beginning in a friendly way is approach conversations with a positive tone to set the stage for cooperation. So that's just really nicely dovetailed. He's not talking about sellers. He's talking about just relationships and how to connect with people. And it really just speaks to what Tony's saying there is about like connect first, send your message second. Whereas the sellers and salespeople and people in general were all about like, I just keep sending my messages. It's like, well, how are you going to connect with me first? Now show me that I should be interested in your agenda. So I think I love it from a relationship standing point. And I would also add on that it's great advice for lots of people, not just early stage SaaS founders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think easier said than done, though. Like when it comes to connecting with people, it's definitely one of the hardest things to do. Do you find there's certain things that really help to drive that meaningful connection?
Yeah, look, I've kind of doing different psychometrics tests over the years, be it Insights or Gallup or something, and some of them are excellent, some of them maybe not so much. But one of the biggest takeaways that I've realized and working with my own coach on this is it's everyone's going to be like, and you see it as in bathrooms, leave the toilet the way you'd like to find it and treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, in actual fact, it's like, how can I treat people the way they want to be treated? And that's the biggest aha I have. Like I've got my certain strengths and things I'm not good at. That's the inverse for other people. But if I try and come into a conversation with someone, like I'm very organized, structured, operational, get stuff done, move quickly. But and there's folks in our team who are more like, let's take time to think about this. Let's come up with different ideas. Like internally, I'm busting the gut. Can we just get going? But if I treat them like that, I'm disengaging them. So I've learned that I've got to understand the different styles and strengths and of others. And again, as you move into leadership, you realize this. And how do I connect with them on that? That pushing my area and the way I like to do it onto people, that takes no effort, zero effort. But it's not how you're going to connect with people, I've realized. And again, when moments are tough, you can default to yourself. But the more that I can spend time on understanding our people and then treating them the way they want to be treated as much as possible, that's where I feel like the connection and the understanding grows even stronger.
That's really good advice. I'm the same as you. I'm always trying to get things moving. But yeah, sometimes just, being surrounded by people that love to analyze things a little bit better, isn't necessarily such a bad thing. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think getting into the shoes and perspective of others definitely helps you connect better.
Like you said, easier said than done, but an absolute necessity.
Absolutely. Martin, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much. And I'm actually going to jump off and do some more research on Gong because I love the idea of using that tool now.
Absolute pleasure. Let me know if you need to find out more. I want to find out more. Yeah.
No problems. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Joanna.